Hello, Gary Simon here of DesignCourse.com. Today we're going to do just a real quick Blender text tutorial. We're going to make it look like dirt and earthy or whatever. So it's only going to be about 10 minutes. I'm actually really busy, so I'm going to speed through this video tutorial really quick. But you can always just pause and rewind and whatever you need to do. All right, so if you haven't yet, check out DesignCourse.com and subscribe here on YouTube. All right, let's get started. Alright, so basically if you've used Blender before, real quickly, if you want to select objects, you right click them by default. If you want to move around, you use your third mouse button or middle mouse button. If you want to zoom up, you use your scroll wheel. And if you want to pan, you hold shift and that third mouse button. So it'll take a little while to get used to be able to quickly move around, but that is expected. So I'm going to hit File, New, Reload Startup File, just looking at the same thing. I'm going to delete that cube by hitting delete and then enter, and then this here is your origin point, and that's where any object that you add will go. If you hit Shift A, you can add a mesh, and we want to, oops, no, I'm so used to adding meshes. We want to add a text right there. So if we zoom up, we'll see it's laying flat. If you hit R for rotate, you can move it around like this. If you hit X, you can only move it around on the X-axis, and if you want to be precise, you can hit 90 for 90 degrees up and down on your keyboard and hit enter. All right, so right now we're in object mode. We want to switch to edit mode. You can also do that by toggling and hitting the key tab. All right, so if we want to delete the text and change it, we can just type it here to earthy, something relevant for what we're about to do. And now if we come out here and drag this thing so we can see all the options and the panels, what we want to do is select this right here. This will allow us to add some 3D depth by extruding it out a little bit, and you could also add depth this way as well. All right, so if yours looks like something like that, that's fine. And now what we want to do is hit Alt and C on the keyboard and make this into a mesh from curve made of surf text. Now what that does is once we go back into tab mode, we no longer can edit the text. We can only see all these crazy vertices hanging around. So what we want to do now is UV unwrap it. So what is that? Well, if you ever want to add a texture onto this, you need to unwrap it. And that's basically inclusive of all type of 3D objects, whether it's a square initially that we saw or anything else. So if we take this, left click and drag out to the right, you'll see the window splits, and we can change the view over here. So by default, it's just a duplicate of this viewport right here. And if you want to change it to UV image editor, we'll see this grid square type thing. This is where we see what the unwrapped UV mesh looks like from this object. So if we hit A twice, we can select all of everything, and then just hitting it toggles on and off, so deselect all or select all. So make sure it's all selected, hit U on your keyboard and hit unwrap. That's what it looks like. So it's crazy. If you hit U again, you can experiment. Smart UV unwrap, hit OK. It looks a little bit better, and you can just play around with these results once we get the actual texture in. So now that it's unwrapped, real quickly, I want to change the Blender render engine to the Cycles render engine. And basically, I exclusively pretty much work in Cycles render. And so now, what we want to do is get out our image for our texture. So I've got out cgtextures.com. It just requires a free registration to download some of these. And they have all these different textures for use in 3D. Or not, or 2D as well. If we click on soil and we click on, I believe it's rough, we'll see. Yeah, yep, that's it. And then over here, we have these three textures. I'm going to choose the one in the middle. I've already downloaded this, and I have it in a project file. So just click this, download after you create a registration. And then what we want to do is change this view here to the node editor. And obviously it's blank here. So what we want to do is, real quick, just to make this easier, I'm going to right click, hit join area, and then left click over here. And I'm going to pull, drag down. It's a little bit easier to work this way. So if I change this again to the node editor, we'll see nothing's here. What we can do, hit tab up here, and we'll go over here to the material section and hit new. Then we see these two, what are called nodes, that show up over here. We can move them around stuff. What we want to do is hit Shift A. We want to add texture, image texture. And then left click and drag this color to that color input over here. And then you can hit open, which will bring you to your project folder, or you can navigate to it. And this is what I want. And then if we come over here, change from solid to rendered, we'll see we have our texture that's now UV mapped onto that text. Real quick, I'm going to lighten things up. So if we come over here to the world tab and increase that, maybe we'll make like a green color, sort of. All right, so this looks okay in and of itself, but if we want to really mess around with it more, we can play around with these nodes. So if you hit control, if you hold control, left click, you can sever that connection. We're going to add a mix shader in between. Shift A, and we'll take in shader and mix shader. All right, just moving things around. Put that right there. Put this one up here. Ooh, not the fact, right there. To the bottom shader one right there. And then hit Shift A, and we're going to add a glossy shader. So a mix shader allows you to add two different shaders. One final thing I want to do is add a displacement. So hit Shift and D to duplicate that over there. And we'll just add this to displacement. As we can see, we kind of have an interesting look here already, as if there's rocks or something in here. And then, of course, you could play around with the color. You could do all sorts of crazy things, obviously. I'm just going to leave mine near white. All right, and let me go ahead and right-click in that area and to join this area down. And I'm going to go over here real quick to the render settings, change from CPU to GPU, and that makes it a lot faster. If you have a GPU, a nice graphics card, and you don't have this option, all you have to do is go to File, User Preferences, and under System, Compute Device, choose CUDA, and you have your cards here. I have two GeForce GTX 580s. All right, and basically over sampling, that's the one thing I want to change. Preview is what we're previewing right now. There's only 10 samples by default, which makes it look grainy, but if we include it to 100 or so, it looks a lot better, but it takes a little bit longer to render. Same thing for render. When you go to finally render it, you can really turn that up to maybe 1,000. All right. So one final thing I want to do real quick is just add a plane. So if I switch back to solid, hit Shift A, plane, hit S for scale, and just type in 20 and it'll be pretty big. And we'll go over here to the materials, hit new, and we'll come over here and change this to a mix shader. Then we have our two shader inputs down here. So you don't always have to use the node editor as we did before. You can mess around with stuff over here. We'll make that first one a diffuse, which is down here. The second one a glossy, which is right there. So now if I preview things, go to rendered, now it's actually sitting on something. If you right click the text, it doesn't show you in rendered view if it's selected, but it is selected because it changed textures here. If you hit G, that's the shortcut for move. You can move it up. So it's kind of sitting right there. Even though the Y is kind of caught off, I'm not really worried about that. But yeah, that is it. So that's how you can quickly take like a texture and just map it onto some type of object to make something kind of cool. And obviously in this case, irrelevant. Maybe you had to do like a poster or something. But yeah, we have earthy text looking earthy of sorts. And that's it for this tutorial. I know I kind of move fast, but I have to be somewhere. So yeah, you can always just pause and stuff. But anyhow, I'm Gary Simon of DesignCourse.com. If you haven't yet, subscribe here on YouTube. I'll see you tomorrow.